right, everyone. I have a very special guest today, Tanner Litchfield. He is. You're in Utah, right? Right now?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, it's gonna be a very good one today. All my podcasts I try to make juicy. I think this will be an especially juicy one. So I found Tanner just the other day, actually, on YouTube. You're on Bigger Pockets. The biggest really podcast channel out there in real estate investing, and the title is something like the Subto Trap or something. And that's me. I love the controversial stuff and seeing the truth behind things. I'm a big guru skeptic, so naturally I was very intrigued by it. And then we have a mutual friend, Greg, who's been on my podcast and channel as well, so he connected us. And really, I just want to dive into. You had kind of a worst case scenario nightmare creative finance deal, which I want to get into, and also talk about the creative finance space and kind of culture of it in real estate investing. So thanks for joining us, Tanner, and being honest and vulnerable with your story. And I think it's going to help a lot of people today. So thanks for being here, man. I'm excited.
Of course, brother. I'm happy to be here.
So can you just give everyone, it doesn't have to be a 30-minute rundown, but it is complicated, but you can just try your best to give, maybe a minute snapshot of this deal. You ended up, spoiler, losing $180,000. So 180, $180,000, which is more than most people make in a single year in this business. So it sounds absolutely devastating, but I'd love to hear what happened with that specific deal that you went over in the Bigger Pockets podcast.
Yeah, and I did this. I did another recap of this in my own personal channel too. So if you want the nitty gritty, you can go there. But I'll keep it to a minute. And if you have more questions, Tim, follow up with it. But
Okay, wait. You plugged your channel, so give everyone the channel hook. If they want to find you, how do they do that?
I don't even know if I want to plug my channel after seeing your videos, because I'm on the very beginning stages, and Tim's doing an excellent job. But I'm the Investor Tanner on all platforms, including YouTube. So,
how long are your videos on average, would you say?
I'd say probably 10 minutes, give or take 2 minutes. So 8 to 12 typically.
Okay, so at the Investor Tanner, that's how they can find you on YouTube. Look, people have time. They can skip watching the 30-minute Bigger Pockets video, and they can watch one of my videos and two of Tanner's videos in the same amount of time. So people have time for both, man.
There we go. I love it. But yeah, so it really started, and again, I'm going to try and make this concise, but no promises. If it's a minute, at least.
I'll stop you if it ends up being super confusing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Do that. I originally am from the Seattle area, which is how I know Greg from mutual friends. And so we had moved, we did pretty good on our live-in flip in Kirkland, Washington. We sold that, had our cash ready to deploy. And then we were in Utah, and probably were a little antsy to put that to work. We got into our first creative deal. This was about 2 years ago. And I just heard the buzzwords of seller finance, right? So 3% interest, things are moving, the cash flow looks great. And I pulled the trigger. I put my down payment of 110 down. I put 70 grand into finishing the basement so I could rent top bottom. And then about a month into my renters being in there, so it's fully leased, I get a letter saying that it's going to the auction. And that's where it started unfolding, right? So I don't know if you want to stop me here, Tim, but this was when I figured out it was getting foreclosed out from underneath me. So the due on sale clause was here.
Yeah. So I listened to the whole Bigger Pockets podcast, and I'll be honest, by the end of it, I was feeling sad for you, but also inspired and also confused, because it was a very complicated transaction. And full transparency, I've never done seller finance, creative finance, Subto. I don't even fully understand the difference. So maybe we can back it up a little bit and give people context. So those are three buzzwords: creative finance, seller finance, Subto. Can you just explain the difference is there a difference or what? And what was this deal in that category?
There is absolutely a difference. And that's, I think, the biggest lesson here, right? Is there is a difference between this umbrella. And I'm not trying to plug my YouTube. but there I do another video actually describing the difference of these, but I'll give the high level of it. There's a creative finance, that's the umbrella for these terms, right? Of what's underneath. So on the umbrella of creative finance, there's lease option, there's contract for deed, there's Subto, and there's seller finance. There's a lot more than that, right? But I'll keep it very brief. Now, on these two that we're talking about, Subto and seller finance are under this umbrella of creative. Subto, the simplest way to say it is there's a bank involved. You're taking over payments from a bank without the bank's permission. And that's not to get confused with an assumable mortgage where you are completely above board and you're going to the bank to actually get permission to take over. Those are completely different things. Now, on the other side of seller finance, this gets confused. People use seller finance like the umbrella term.
Okay.
And it's completely different. Like my definition of seller finance is when the property is owned outright and you are working directly with the seller to create a win-win solution with these terms. So completely different than Subto, where there's a bank involved.
Okay, so if I'm looking for low interest deals, low money down deals, if I find a deal and there's basically 100% equity, there's no mortgage, I'd probably end up doing a seller finance deal. If there is a mortgage, then I would probably end up doing a Subto deal or an assumable mortgage, but most likely probably a Subto deal where I'm taking over the mortgage payment. Still kind of getting the end result where I'm getting a low interest, but there's different parties involved and there's different kind of paperwork and nuance. Did I break that down correctly?
Yes, that's exactly right. But there's one thing that I'll say in there, Tim, that there might be a rumor out there where seller finance deals, you can get really low down. And that's like maybe more guru talk. Subto is a lot more likely to get low down because there's no equity. Like that seller doesn't have a lot of equity in there to play with, so they don't care as much. Whereas seller finance, usually your down payments are much higher because they have the full amount of equity to play with. And so they're incentivized by a higher down payment. It's not to say you can't get a low down on a seller finance, but it's a lot less likely.
Got it. And this deal that you got super burned on, that was a Subto deal? Is that right?
Exactly.
Got it. So what enticed you about doing this deal? You said before you were doing what, flips or rentals, or what were you doing in Seattle?
Yeah, I was doing more like the BRRRR method for buy and hold, and then like flips, and then wholesale. All of it was centered around like the value add big rehab projects per se.
Got it. Okay, so why not just keep doing that in Utah? Why did you end up doing a Subto deal? What made you interested in doing that, which is kind of different from your core business model?
Of course, that's a great question, and it's really interest rates doubled right around the time that I moved to Utah. So it's not necessarily the move that prompted the switch to creative. It was more so high interest rates. The flippers who were the customers for the wholesale were a lot more weary to get into something short term like that. I, as a flipper, had that same sentiment. And on the buy and hold method, if I did a BRRRR, then refinancing back into it, the numbers didn't work to cash flow and get all my money back. So that because the shift.
I got it. So if we're I guess just making up like fake numbers to make it easy, the normal, I guess, okay, can you actually give me an example maybe of a BRRRR deal that used to work with the 3% interest rates, and now why it doesn't work specifically with the higher interest rates? Like what does that math look like?
Yeah, exactly. And so let's say you buy a property for $1 million. I mean, let's say it's maybe a duplex in a nice area, fourplex. I'm just trying to make numbers clean here, right? You could use the same metric for $100,000 in Memphis, whatever your brain does. But if I bought a property where the after repair value was $1 million in a BRRRR, I'm trying to buy that for, let's say, like 600 grand, put $100,000 into it. So I'm all in for 700. Now I have 30% equity that I can refinance and get all of my cash back. Now, the problem here with high interest rates, when I pull all my cash out, I don't know that my rents or my income can cover my debt service. If it was 3% interest rate and my payment, let's say, and I'm going to butcher this because I don't, my brain's not a calculator, but
yeah,
let's say it's like on a 3% interest rate, your payment was like $4,500 and your rents are $6,000. You're doing okay when you pull out all your money. But if you pull out your money and your refinance with the bank is a 7%, and now your payments are like $7,000, but your rents are still $6,000, that asset has now turned into a liability from my perspective because I'm losing money every month. So
you would have to buy that property at an even way steeper discount, which is just a lot harder, especially in today's market. So a lot of bird deals no longer work that used to work.
Exactly right. Yep.
And rents haven't caught up to the debt service by any means.
No, not even close. No. So
that's what made you enticed to do a Subto deal. And I reckon to think that is what is enticing a lot of people to do Subto deals.
Exactly.
So yeah, interesting. My main concern is this. So, and we can go into the specifics. I do want to dive into some of the specifics of your deal, but just to give everyone context, like why we're even talking about this, I've never done a Subto deal. Frankly, I'm very risk averse. I'm scared. I'm scared to do it. I'm scared of paperwork. And it just seems super complicated. And I just feel like there's like 5 ways I can get fucked. And but at the same time, I go online and I see, Subto this, Subto that, Pace Morby's blowing up. Everyone, Subto is the best program ever, and not just Pace Morby, but it's. I think I say him because he's kind of the face of it, but there's other. I think it's just symbolic of the trend as well. So nothing specifically against Pace, but I'm using him to say the gurus of Subto. So I'm confused. I'm confused because it makes it seem so easy, but I'm scared of it. So I'm trying to find, am I just being a little bitch about it or not? And then, you've gone through it. And I would like you to maybe talk about some of the, I guess we can go into what happened with the deal specifically. So the due on sale clause was called. And okay, so correct me if I'm wrong here. The main risk that I see is the due on sale clause. So basically, if you're doing a Subto deal, and Pace Morby has all these videos about due on sale, that it's not as risky as you think if the bank never finds out, which sounds a little fishy saying that, but basically, if you take a mortgage subject to, there's a clause in the mortgage that says, hey, if this ends up getting subject to, the bank has the right to call the loan due, and then the investor has to pay it. Mm-hmm. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. Like if you transfer title is like transfer ownership, right? And it's not even a Subto. Like if someone tried to transfer that to your brother or your sister or an LLC, right? Like that's the same concept with a due on sale. It's not just against investors per se.
Got it. So what I hear is that due on sale clause never gets called. I heard Pace Morby on, I think he was on the Steve Trang podcast, and he said something, this isn't a direct quote, but like, all my 1,000 students over 10 years, I've seen the due on sale clause get called once. I recently, and this kind of sparked me going through this kind of investigation here, I've been in a few Facebook groups and I see people saying, hey, look, my note has been called, and due on sale. And I'm wondering, because if you think about the history of the due on sale clause, that it was created, I think is in the 70s when interest rates were also super high. So they literally, the banks created the due on sale clause for this specific situation where people were trying to circumvent the high interest rates to take advantage of previous low interest rates. So that is why due on sale clause was even created. And now we're at a point where people are doing the same thing. Hey, look, you can circumvent the banks to get a low interest rate, but the banks are never going to call due on sale. But to me, well, that's the reason why it was even invented. And there's a lot more nuance to it. But can you kind of go through the risks of it? So it was called on you, but maybe you're just an exception, maybe not. But can you talk about the due on sale clause, maybe what happened with you specifically, and do you think that is actually a risk for people who want to do Subto?
Yeah, and before I go into that answer, I'll say like in today's market, I would still do a sub 2. And and there's a huge emphasis on but, it's only because I know what I know now. And that's what frustrates me about the agenda that's being pushed out there, is that anyone and everyone should get into sub 2 deals. There is a lot of moving parts in these deals, and the frustrating part for me, and if I did a sub 2 deal, it would have to be very, very clean, put low down, and I would have to understand that loan product is very safe, right? And a conventional loan is said to be the safest route in a sub 2 loan or in a sub 2 deal. And so I'll preface by saying that I think sometimes people hear me talk about sub 2 and just think I'm like, I'll never do this again. And that's not true. I got burned by sub 2 because I had no idea what I was doing. And the hard part too is there's not a single resource you can go to learn everything you want about sub 2. I talked to so many different lawyers. I talked to different title companies. I talked to different agents that I respected. And it seems like everyone has an opinion on what they think happens, on what they think triggers due on sale. No one can tell you upright, if you transfer insurance, due on sale will be called. There's not like a booklet that tells you all of these things. And so you have to understand these risks, right? So I don't know. That's just like the 2 cents I wanted to throw in before I dove into your question. And in doing so, I already forgot your question. So if you want to reiterate that.
I think it partially answered it, but if you could go into, it sounds like for your deal that you lost 180 grand on, the due on sale clause was called. I think that's probably what's on everybody's mind is what's so special about Tanner's situation, and can this happen to me? So maybe you can go into what you missed, because you saying that the market is incentivizing you and others to do sub 2 deals. There was something that you missed that ended up screwing you over and losing 180 grand on. So is other people going to miss it? Is this such a crazy, unique circumstance? So maybe just go into, I guess the first question is the specifics of how you missed this due on sale clause being triggered, and what specifically triggered it for this deal.
Of course. And it was 100% the loan product that I took over.
It wasn't a conventional mortgage.
It was not a conventional. And people do FHA, people do VA. It's not to say that those, like, they're just tracked a little bit more. People do sub 2 at scale with those loan products as well. But why mine was the worst one that could possibly be taken over was, which I had no idea of this at the time, it was a low income entity it was like a down payment assistance program per se. And so what we call Utah housing, and Utah is like the most common one to stay away from, a Utah housing loan where they're helping you bring the down payment. Mine was even worse than that. It was a much smaller entity that teams up with the government to build low income. That's one of their, like, they help assist in the down payment. They help build in these neighborhoods. And the reason these hold a lot more risk is because people are tracking these loans a lot closer. Okay. And so whereas a conventional, there's thousands of them. FHA, there's even more probably than conventional. Don't quote me on that. But there's a lot more assistance with the government on FHA versus conventional is 20% down. It checks the boxes with the bank and they go about their way. So with my NeighborWorks, not only was there down payment assistance, but they also had a deed restriction in there saying that it had to be owner occupied. And that caused a ton of grief in this transaction to where I couldn't save it as well. So,
and there was no easy way to figure that out before you were financially committed to the deal. I mean, I'm sure in hindsight, yeah, but like for the average person, is that something that can easily be determined?
Having a title company you trust could have easily avoided this 100%. I was using the wholesaler's title company because that's what was pushed. And if you've seen the video, the issue was I trusted the person selling me the deal. And so I was kind of going along with whatever he pushed in my
Mm.
face, and that's where I got taken advantage of for sure. So
the lesson is a bit okay. Was there any more maybe specifics of the deal that are worth mentioning of why you got screwed, or is it kind of simple of, hey, I assumed a bad loan that, and how did the bank find out about it? Because I thought as long as you don't tell the bank, I see comments all the time. Oh well, the bank doesn't find out, you're good. So I know you said it's being tracked more, but can you, like, how did it actually fall apart on you? Like when was doomsday? How did that get triggered?
and that's the thing, is no one will ever know. Like, I don't know what specific thing like caught the eyes of the bank in this deal, and they won't tell you. They'll never tell you. And so that's like the guessing side of it. As I've done more research and talked to more attorneys, my best guess was that the arrears were too far, like they were too deep into the arrears and too close to the auction, that they were already tracking this and with close eyes. And now all of a sudden the arrears were paid, or so I had hoped. And then it was too late at that point. So that's what I'll say with that. But you asked another question, is like, what else could I have done? Like, if I did this deal today, what would I have done differently? Another part of that is you can get a power of attorney to talk on the seller's behalf to the bank. And that would have helped me tremendously. Because in this entire like debacle, if I would have got signatures from the seller to get a payoff, then I could have got a hard money loan, paid off the debt service, and then I would go sell, and I probably still would have lost a little bit of money because I was buying because of the terms, but I would not have lost close to 180 grand. So the power of attorney is massive. And if you have a title company that you trust, or a transaction coordinator, a creative transaction coordinator that you trust, like, none of this would have happened.
So is it safe to say then, if you want to do Subto deals, as long as you have a title company that you trust, and I guess what, mentors maybe that you trust, then you're in the clear?
Yeah. I'm not in the clear. Much better off than me getting into a deal that you can't. Because I mean, even if you're go through all the steps, there's always that risk of the note getting called, even on a conventional, right? Like, I think that's the part with me that doesn't sit right, and that's why I'll never put $110,000 down again. Is if I did Subto, it'd be much less down payment because I have a lot less skin in the game. Because the hard part with me with Subto is that I'm probably maybe closer to you than some people on like being risk adverse, but I do take a ton of risks. So I can't say that, but the purpose for me of investing is the peace of mind. And if I'm always thinking of the possibility of this due on sale, it's, if I had 10 grand invested, I would sleep a lot better than if I had 180 grand invested on a deal and it falls apart. Right. So
very interesting. Okay. Now I'm going to read. So I'm looking at your Bigger Pockets video, and I'm just looking at the comments. Have you read through the comments of the video?
I did at one point, but I haven't in a minute.
So here's some advice here. I want to know what you think about it. So it says, always have someone help you underwrite the deal. Always have a top tier title company help with paperwork. Also, these problems are not subject to specific. The Burr method and other strategies can lose your money if done wrong too. All strategies can and will lose you money when done incorrectly or not verified. It's a good deal. Do you agree with that? Or do you think there's maybe some nuance as well that's missing within that?
I'll agree hand in hand with 1 and 2. Number 3 is where, yes, there's always risk involved with investing. The Burr method, of course, there's risk involved. I think the difference with Subto and some of these other strategies, like let's compare it to seller financing, or let's compare it to Burr, is that there is a written handbook on what you can and can't do. Like seller financing, probably a little bit, that's a worse example, right? But with Burr, you're not doing anything too intricate to where you can mess up. Like where you mess up in Burr is like miscalculating your rehab, or interest rates jump, and it's less about like I feel like with Sub 2, you're almost like an Inspector Gadget. Like you're like, I don't even know why I said Inspector Gadget, but you're this detective. That's the better word. You're a
Yeah.
detective trying to figure out the answers, and no one can tell you the exact answers. That's the frustrating part for me.
So to me, that just means more risk. It's like an
Exactly.
information risk, right?
Yeah.
So how do you think that people who want to do sub 2 should analyze risk appropriately?
That's a really good question. And honestly, like I'll preface with I'm not a Sub 2 expert, clearly. Like
Right. Yeah.
um but what I will say from my own personal like buy box is putting less money down just so like you have less skin in it. Having a creative, which that comment says a top tier transaction coordinator is huge because they understand it a lot better. They'll get the proper paperwork. They'll get the POA. And then number 3 is the loan product. So be very, very cautious of what loan product you're taking over. I said number 3, like that was my final, but having a title company that you trust and on your team is massive. Because if you think about it, like if you find a title company that is well versed in creative finance, then they're doing thousands of these transactions. Whereas even if you're a high level creative finance agent investor, you're doing a tenth of that, right?
Right.
So they see a lot more than we do, and they're an excellent resource to shoot ideas back and forth. I still talk to my title company on a daily basis, walking through different solutions and strategies. So they're massive.
Do you think that the risk of sub 2 deals is higher now than it was 5 or 10 years ago?
I would say yes. And the reason I say yes is more off speculation. But
It's fair.
I think that banks are going to look at these loans a lot more if rates are at 7% versus when they were at 3 or even 4.5 5 years ago. So for that reason, I have some speculation. There's not any data. There's not any true evidence behind that, but that's a worry of mine. Now, there's also a lot more publicity behind it, like you mentioned, Pace, and I'm a member of Sub 2 now. Like if I had done what Sub 2 teaches, I probably wouldn't have been in this situation. Now, with that being said, I think a lot of people like the social media, the front of it makes it seem like it's a lot easier than it is, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But I will say there is more risk today because of the attention that's thrown into it and because of a higher interest rate environment.
Yeah, I saw a video that Pace Morby put out. I'll use him as an example. You mentioned him. It was something like explaining sub 2, but it was talking about maybe it was like seller finance, but it was talking about, oh, like you can do it with a car, you can do it with a phone, you can do it with literally anything. You can seller finance, and it's like real estate's no different. And in to some level, yes, but to some level, you don't have to look at the loan products if you're seller financing like a PlayStation or something. You know what I mean, right? So there's maybe some specifics there. And my main thesis, again, I'm not by any means, I'm a sub 2 newbie, but my main thesis and what I'm trying to, and why I'm talking to you and trying to do some research on is I think the risks are not being analyzed appropriately. I think based on social media that people who doing sub 2 deals are not accurately analyzing the risks involved doing it. And that's my concern. And that's what I'm worried about, because it's the golden age of sub 2. Pace Morby said golden age of sub 2, but I'm like, well, is it though? Like, is it going to be? Is the party going to crash soon? Is it too good to be true? I'm a skeptic, and I could be completely wrong, but that's why we're here. And do you think there's some truth to that, or you think I'm on the right basis? Do you feel the same way?
No, and I definitely do, but I will play devil's advocate here. Whereas I feel like you're doing a great job in media, almost as like a journalist per se.
Mm-hmm.
Which as a journalist, you kind of dive into the nitty gritty, and you uncover truths, you uncover the truth, which I think is amazing. Whereas I think, especially in the real estate side, which I'm not saying this is right or wrong, I think Pace Morby is a marketer. He throws out a lot of attention grabbing media, which can get people in trouble. I will 100% say that it can get people in trouble. But if you had like an hour session with Pace of how to do a sub 2 deal, he wouldn't make it seem as simple as maybe a 40-second clip does, right? Like he would tell you to go to a TC, a top tier TC, who's going to guide you through each step. He's going to tell you to check the loan product. He's going to tell you to a lot more different than what a 45-second clip portrays. And so that's where I have these conversations with my head. I don't have a right answer to this. That 45-second clip can lead to someone making a mistake like I did, right? It's like, oh, it's a lot easier than we assume. But then another person will say, well, did you dive into his program and see step 1 through 10 of what you should do? And I obviously did not do that. And I wouldn't be here if I did that. And I'm not saying like I'm not a fanboy by any means. Like I'm very limited in my engagement with Sub 2 in that community. I don't really interact much in there. But that's what I'll say is I feel like I am a marketer as well. And if I talk about seller finance in a 45-second clip, and I talk about this is what you do with a seller to negotiate, and then people actually are in front of a seller and trying to use my advice from a 45-second clip to take that to the finish line, their hands are going to be up and they're not going to know what to do. So that's where I don't have an answer, but I love these conversations because I feel like I'm an open book, and whatever I feel I say, and that's my thoughts on it. I don't have an answer, but I see both sides in a way.
Do you think that, I mean, there's a lot of different, courses and gurus will say in the real estate investment space, whether it's wholesaling, marketing. I mean, I run Google Ads in a way. I talk about that, and probably shouldn't start a campaign with a 45-second clip that I say either, So, but do you think that for Sub 2 specifically, compared to wholesaling, flipping, or other methods, more care should be taken into the promotion of it, especially with short form content like YouTube Shorts or TikTok or Instagram Reels, than maybe other type of real estate strategies?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I don't. But I will say that flipping and wholesaling should have the same risks communicated in their videos, because if you think about flipping, I've lost money in flipping. I've lost good chunks of money in flipping. Wholesaling is even more of like, to me, more than Sub 2. Whereas I think Sub 2, if the seller, we'll use as an example, has very little skin in the game, they're just trying to get out of a bad situation. And a wholesaler as well, right? Like they're trying to solve an issue for the seller, but they can get taken advantage of, the seller, especially in a wholesale deal. So I don't know if that answers your question. I feel like risks should be communicated thoroughly in every coaching program that involves real estate, because these are high ticket, high risk environments. And that's where I'll share the same sentiment with you, Tim, is that these gurus do not do a great job of advertising these risks. That's something that I try and do. Is I'm not a guru. I don't sell a coaching platform, but if my social media is out there, I want to talk openly about my losses because I don't want to paint a picture that's not true. Flipping, there's risk. Wholesaling, there's risk. There's a lot less risk in wholesaling, but in an ethical boundary, there's a ton of risk at hand for the seller, right? And so that's my 2 cents. I don't know if that's
So
a
do you
rant
think?
or not.
No, no, no. I mean, I rant as well. Rant away. We can both rant. I'll cut you off if I find my focus going. I'll be like, well, let me Anyway, so a couple more questions here, and then we'll wrap it up soon. So do you think that the risks of Subto are underemphasized in social media?
1,000,000%.
So
1,000,000%.
can you break down some of the risks that we could be referring to that maybe people aren't as obvious about? Everyone knows the benefits of it: low interest rates, low money down. Hey, you can get a good spread and you can bring in some cash flow. But what are the risks that people may not fully realize?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll start with the obvious, and the one that's talked about most is the due on sale clause, right? If that gets called, you have to have an exit strategy and you need to act fast, whether that's selling the property, whether that's refinancing into a much higher rate. But some of these risks that aren't talked about as much, and I'm not saying I even have again, I'll reiterate, I'm not a Subto expert, but some risks that come to my mind just being in the real estate industry is what happens if you take over someone's loan and they go bankrupt? Do you think that the bank is going to have a say about the house that their name is on? And when I say their name is on, that doesn't even have to do with the title. That has to do with the loan is attached to their name, which is attached to this property, right? So that's what I challenge people to think about, right? Is it's not as simple as is the due on sale clause going to get called, right? Because a due on sale clause got called on me, and I go into the solutions here, which they talk about a lot, is throw it on a contract for deed where I'm no longer the title holder. And so now, because I don't own the property, I'm no longer at risk, which is far from the truth, because the bank was aware, and there was a deed restriction saying that I couldn't own the property. So there's these intricacies that aren't being communicated, and investors are tackling these deals, and hopefully it doesn't happen, but maybe I was 1 in 1,000,000, and I'm here to tell the story of you don't want to be the 1 in 1,000,000. Or if in 10 years, like I was talking about, if the banks start calling more of these due, then maybe it's not 1 in 1,000, maybe it's 1 in 20. And are you comfortable making that risk, right?
So what would happen then with your well, I guess I don't quite understand maybe the nuance of the due on sale clause I get, but the other risk that you mentioned, can you dive in exactly how that would happen and how you would lose your money that way?
Are you talking about the bankruptcy or the deed
Correct.
restriction?
The bankruptcy.
Yeah. So, and this is one, that's why I wanted to preface that I don't know the solution or what would happen in this specific
Okay.
scenario, because I have never been through it. But what I will say is that if I buy a house from you, Tim, and your loan is on this house still, but I am now the owner. But if you go and spend $400,000 with the bank to buy a Lamborghini, and you stop making payments on that Lamborghini, and now the bank's like, hey, we're going to take this Lamborghini, but you still owe us a lot of money. What other assets do you have that I can go after? And if the bank sees that your name is on a house that has $100,000 of equity, all I am challenging people to do is, I feel like the bank is going to have a say on that house.
Right.
I don't know what the solution is. I have no idea, but I would argue that they are going to have a conversation about that. So I don't know where it'll end up, but that's what I want people to think about, right?
The moral of the story is incentives, and the bank in a lot of situations may be incentivized to get their money from you. And legally, how it happens, it seems to be very complicated, and every situation is different. It depends on exactly what the loan is and everybody's situation. But at the end of the day, if the bank is incentivized to get their money back, you're going to be in a pile of shit. Who knows if you're going to lose any money? You may lose a crazy amount like you, or you may lose a little bit, but it's definitely going to be something that you probably didn't consider when you were doing that Subto deal. And that's my main point, is that banks are more and more incentivized to maybe come after you than they would have been in the past. And you just need to be aware of that when you're calculating your numbers and determining if it's a good deal or not.
Of course.
Would you agree?
Of course. And there's one more thing, Tim, that I want to add to this that I don't think people think through completely, because it's a little bit more intricate. And if you're in real estate, then it might make more sense. But let's say we'll use that same example. I am taking over your payments, Tim. And so I'm going to buy your house via Subto. Now, let's say in a year, I want to sell that property, but I'm not going to be able to sell it for what I bought it for unless I pass on those same terms. So now this is called, if I'm selling a deal and keeping the terms in place that I have with you, it's called a wrap. And if I sell this property on a wrap, if this third person that I sold it to, if they stop making payments, I am liable. If they stop making payments, I still am contractually obligated to make those payments to you. And this has been, I know of a few situations where this has happened. So it's more common than people think. And so by selling on a wrap, you are not wiping your obligations on a property. And the hard part is, now if you want to go after this person, they have very little skin in the game. And now you're deep in attorney fees, and the solution needs to come about, and it gets messy, right? So those are all real solution or real problems that arise in these deals. What
about just as well, like thinking about solutions to mitigate some of the risks here? So I've heard of a due on sale clause insurance. Are you familiar with that? I've only seen one company, Pace Mowbray maybe owns it, I think, like Equity Assurance. I don't know if it's how that's exactly structured, but there's no other company that exists except the guy selling Subto coaching programs. So I'm a little skeptical of it, but do you have any experience with that, or have any perspective on insurance for due on sale clause?
So this is my knowledge of it, which I think is actually a great point to what you're trying to do here. Is I heard it was a thing, and in the Subto community, which I'm a part of, there was a thread about it, right? Like, is this still a thing? Where is it at? Where can I find more information? And the entire sentiment of all the comments was that it is no longer a business. And if it is no longer a business, that people cannot stand behind the risk associated, to me, that's a red flag.
The risk is a lot higher, so the numbers don't make sense for the insurance product. Maybe
that's my 2 cents. Again, this is another
speculation.
Yeah, and that's where there seems to be a lot of speculation in this strategy, and so it's like that's why I don't get involved as much as some others do.
Do you think that Subto is too overhyped? It's too popular, that maybe less people should know about it?
Honestly, I don't know if it's overhyped, because I think it fits for certain people's personalities, and it works well for some people. It just doesn't fit with my personality. So I'm not here to say like it should be disbanded or anything. I think the risk should be more talked about. But I wouldn't say that it's like overhyped or too popular. It just, for my personality, I think that's the whole world of investing, is you fit what strategy you find what strategy fits your personality. I like to be a little bit more clear about what I'm after, and seller finance is a lot more clear, a lot more creativity at hand, and it fits, right? And so that's what I'll say to that.
And it feels to me a lot less risk involved because it's more clear. So there's the nuance. You don't even have to worry if you don't know what you don't know, because there's honestly just less to know.
Yeah. There will never be a due on sale clause in a seller finance deal that I do. And I know
Yeah.
that. So that eliminates the main risk, right?
And you can sleep better at night.
Exactly.
With that. Now, last point I'll make, other potential solutions to hedge against the risk, refinancing. So can you just, let's say a bank did have a due on sale clause, can you just go to another bank, refinance the mortgage, and then everybody's happy? What's wrong with doing that? Is that something you could have done, or like maybe not for your situation, but just in general, like any problem with that strategy?
Yeah. The problem with that strategy is that the bank requires a certain loan to value. And so a lot of these sub 2 deals are putting very little down. And so if you pay, let's say you have 15 grand of equity in a sub 2 deal, and in order to refinance, you need like 120 grand of equity to refinance for the bank's risk. And so that's where it becomes an issue, is you're going to have to cough up that capital to make sure the bank's confident in it. The reason that I specifically couldn't refinance into it is because that I couldn't get a payoff. I couldn't get a signature for a payoff, and I couldn't own that property with a deed restriction. And in order to pay off the underlying debt, I had to have a signature from the seller.
And even if you could get through those hurdles, wouldn't the interest rates, because most sub 2 deals are low interest rates, so if you're refinancing, now you run into the problem that you have with Burr, is that, well, now your payments might be double.
100%. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. The deal doesn't work at that point if you refinance. Now you're negative cash flowing, right?
Exactly. So the number one problem is, can you get the loan? Do you have the means to bring cash to the table to get the loan? Or if you have equity, then cool, get the loan. But then the second part of it is, if you can get that loan, do you even want to get it? Like if I have 10 grand invested into a sub 2 deal and I'm jumping into a new loan where I'm going to be losing $500 a month, my personality is I'd rather just wipe the 10 grand and leave the property. But ethically, right, then the homeowner is screwed and their credit's going to get shot. So I probably would just take the loan, sell it off. But the concept is like, you don't want to have an asset in your portfolio that's losing money, because then it's a liability.
So I heard Pace Morby say, I think he was on the Graham Stephan podcast. I did a video about Pace Morby, so I know a lot of like random clips that he says, because I kind of research his like career history. It's very interesting. But he said something like he's worth at the time he has $250 million in real estate, and 50 of it is equity, and the other 200 million are probably like mortgages. Now, I'm assuming a lot of them are subject to, because that's what he teaches. He obviously eats his own dog food. Do you think that if a couple of them, a significant amount, start getting called, then if he tries refinancing, let's say there are 100 properties that are positively cash flowing, now to refinance them all, instead of making 10 grand a month, now you're losing 10 grand a month. You could kind of run into a domino effect potentially, where now you have to keep trying to sell them to maybe pay off the to get out of the negative cash flow, and then you maybe can't if the values either don't go up or go down, right? Is that correct? Am I understanding that risk right, or is that oversimplified?
I'm not sure if I completely understand that, but I will say, like, if a large amount of those were starting to get called today, then I could see a domino effect trickling in. But I think where a lot of these sub 2 investors hedge their bet is on appreciation and rents increasing, right? Because if, let's say, he's owned a property for 4 years via sub 2, he's probably okay. He probably has a decent amount of equity. The rents have probably gone up and he's okay. If he's owned that property for a year and he paid market value or maybe a slight premium on that deal and it got called due, that's where he's in trouble, right? Or if the market corrects, right? It's on that same side. Like right now, the market went crazy, then it kind of plateaued, and now it's going up a little bit. But if that market corrects, then you're exactly right. And those notes getting called due, then he's upside down and there's no more value. But that's the same with a seller finance deal or a traditional deal, is your equity can always ebb and flow per se.
Yeah, that's what concerns me. Is like I interviewed. He's actually the very first Bigger Pockets guest, Marty Boardman. I interviewed him last year, and in 2008, he lost, I think, $50 million worth of property because he was basically buying them for equity, assuming that the value is going to go up because it has the last 15 years or 20 years. And then once it crashed, I guess maybe his interest rates, because they were variable, went up. And then his positive, his mortgage payment became more than the rents he was getting, and it started to be a domino effect. So he lost all his properties. Now, this is maybe obviously not as extreme. I'm not saying there's like a crazy recession. A lot of people got screwed, I think, including Pace Morby and all these other gurus who lost everything in 2008. It's a common story. But the principle of I need the market to keep going up in order for this to work and not lose my shirt maybe isn't the best philosophy and did people dirty in the past.
100%. And
yeah.
And that's why like a cash flowing deal on a 30-year fixed debt is the best way to hedge against that risk for me, right? Like the properties I bought in 2019, those deals they have a property manager in, they're cruising on a 30-year fixed. I don't think about them at all. Now, even on seller finance, right, there's still that risk. So now I have to make a decision. If I want cash flow, I got to go to the Midwest where appreciation is very slim, or I stay here in Utah and make some calculated risks on a seller finance deal. I mostly am true seller finance, right? So this is disregarding Subto, disregarding due on sale, but there's still that risk that in 5 years, in 10 years, whenever my balloon expires, that I have to have an exit strategy on refinance or sell. And if the market crashes, then I have to get creative, right? And so there's definitely risk. To me, I'd rather take that risk, and I won't take a short balloon for this same mentality, but I will take a 10-year balloon and a cash flowing in an appreciating market that cash flows over maybe, let's say, a 30-year fixed in the Midwest, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got you. At the end of the day, the point we're trying to hammer home is analyzing risk. And I think it's important to understand a lot of different variables, your market, the risk of the market going down, the benefit of the market going up, all the different contracts, all the information that you don't have is also a risk. It's a big one. And just being able to analyze that as best you can and not be swayed so much by the shiny object and what you hear on social media, because it's very nuanced. It's very specific to the individual, as Tanner was saying. And you need to really take it very seriously. Otherwise, you could have a tough story like Tanner. So how are you doing? I mean, losing 180K, if I lost that, I probably would never do real estate again. I mean, are you okay? Like, how much has this set back your business? This happened? How long ago did this deal happen or finish?
This is probably close to 2 years ago when it happened.
Okay, wow.
So,
wow. Yeah.
Maybe 18 months. My time, like my memory is terrible. So anyways, I've probably blurred out a lot of the trauma now. That's
exactly
also part of it. But
yeah.
I'm doing good. Like honestly, I'm doing great. That's the part, like in Bigger Pockets, I didn't really get to talk about the turnaround. And I was legit depressed for like 2 weeks. And maybe even longer. Like after I concluded that I lost 180 grand, from that point to where as a done deal, 2 weeks of depression. But like the depression of maybe less depression, more like panic of going through this for the 2 or 3 months, working with attorneys, working with my tenants who were pissed. All of that was like wild, right? So that was, I probably lost a few years of my life like from that stress. But honestly, as soon as in those 2 weeks where it was a done deal, I had just come to terms with losing the 180 grand. My mind said, I'm either going to be depressed about this and let it lull for a long time and my entire business will suffer because of it, or I'm going to take it on the chin. I'm going to own up to it and I'm going to be better because of it. And the last piece to that was my wife. Like, telling your wife you lost 180 grand of your money is a extremely tough conversation to have. And is obviously the initial conversation wasn't all like sunshine and glory, but like she came around to it and said, I trust you and like I believe you'll figure it out. And that's all I needed. Like, once I heard that, then it was just like a hunger, right? Like, I'm going to learn from this and I'm going to go and dominate. And like the lessons and the tactics I learned from this L turned into my best year I've had in my entire career. Like, the amount of money that I made from deals where I could be a genuine discussion with these people, I gained trust from them. I told them, hey, here's the risk with Subto. I will help you with a Subto deal if you're fully aware and confident in these risks. Sure, let's go find you a deal. If not, and after my discussion, 9 out of 10 people go true seller finance with me. And so that's probably good in a way, right? And now most of my business is true seller finance, but the amount of revenue that came from my business after this L just in the first year has been wild, and I know it's going to continue to give back. So I don't condone, or I'm no longer giving myself the excuse for expensive lessons, because I think that's just like a joke. But once you do lose it, you got to have a certain mentality behind it, and that's the one that I chose. So
that's great. I'm glad that there's a positive end to the story. You know, if maybe this is kind of a tough question, but if 2023 didn't pan well, do you think you even would have went on the Bigger Pockets interview? It's a little bit easier to say, hey, I lost all this money, but well, I turned it around now, so now I'm good. But do you think you would have done it anyway?
I don't think I would have been in the room to even be on that podcast, because I had to get to a point where I was confident enough with myself and with my business to be able to talk about it. And that sounds selfish, but it is like a massive loss, right? And now I understand that I can help a lot more people, and so I'm a lot more open about it. But it took me a while to get to that point where I was completely open about the loss. And so and that's how I got on Bigger Pockets, is me posting about it on my own social media. And then one of my buddies in Seattle, who's a host of Bigger Pockets, saw it and was like, more people need to understand this. And that's kind of where it happened. So
you got to wonder the people that didn't have a good turnaround, or maybe don't have quite as healthy of a mindset as you do, or it just maybe had enough time hasn't passed yet, are still going through it. And there's a lot of stories out there that, you know, aren't on Bigger Pockets, don't have the connections, don't feel confident, they don't feel embarrassed or whatever. It just makes me wonder how many people are out there like that. And if you are out there like that, anyone listening, I'd love for you to reach out to me. I'm not saying, hey, let's share your dirty laundry or anything like that, but I'd love if you'd be willing to just share your story, even if it's not posted. I'd love to hear it, because I think social media is not the full picture, and I'm trying to dig, and like you said, journalism, I guess, and try to uncover the other side of things. So I think it's a great way to wrap it up, man. I'm really happy for you. I'm glad you're able to turn things around. I don't know if I could have done it. You have an amazing wife, though. I mean, my wife is amazing too. And I remember I got laid off And she basically had the same sentiment, like, I trust you. And it's the greatest thing, and it makes your relationship even stronger ultimately.
100%.
But now I'm rambling. People don't want to hear about my marriage. It's the end of the podcast. I've been listening to it for an hour. Any final words that you have here before we wrap it up? Anything you want to say about anything we talked about, or questions I didn't ask you? Now's your chance.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, just from our last statement that came to my mind is that, like, that's one reason I applaud and have a ton of respect for you, Tim, is that you're taking a massive risk on these high-end YouTube videos where you have no idea where it's going to pan out, right? And I think, like, if you have a certain amount of confidence in yourself, and my mentality is that I will always take risks to bring myself to a higher level. And my hope is that these risks become more and more calculated, right? Like, I've learned from this lesson that I won't make that same mistake, but the trajectory of my career in general from taking calculated risks has panned out extremely well for me at my age. And so I don't want this huge L to stop people from taking risks that will benefit in the long term. Please learn from my mistakes, but I don't think you can elevate to a level that I want to elevate without taking risk. And so I will always take risks. I'll try and be more and more calculated about them in the future, right? But I think that's the sentiment I want to share. So
100%. And hopefully this video and other videos that maybe you post or other people that come out can help people take more calculated risks than maybe they could have a couple years ago. So 100% agree. I'm not here saying don't do Subto. I'm not an expert, but just understand the risk, and just, it's not all rainbows and sunshines, and don't be naive.
100%.
Thanks, man. I appreciate your time, Tanner, and I hope I'll be looking forward to watching your YouTube channel, man, and watching it grow, and maybe we'll do some collabs sometime, man. So
I would
wishing you
love
the
it,
best.
too. I'll have to have more conversations with you surrounding that, but I appreciate you having me on for sure.
Thanks, Tanner. Take care, man.
Of course. Bye-bye, brother.